Well, hi, and welcome to my shop where I'm working on this Philips radio you see in front of you. And lots of changes since my last video. I spent some time in here without my camera running, doing a number of tests, injecting signals, and fiddling around with my oscilloscope. And then I have to admit something to you. I got a little curious about what band I was on. Now, I've just taken the glass off here because I'm cleaning it all up. And maybe it's a little hard to see like this. But I had the radio tuned on this top band, the lowest frequency band. And because it's only in meters, there's no frequencies written up in here. I looked at the meter numbers there, which is 740 to 1980 meters. I thought, well, that must be the AM band. Didn't give it much more thought. Well, as it turns out, this is the AM band. I think that says 190 to 590 meters. The very middle of the AM band at 1 megahertz is the same as 300 meters, and you can see that falls in the middle of these numbers. In Europe, there's another broadcast band below the standard North American AM broadcast band. So now I know all these things. Once I set the radio to the proper band, I was able to pick up weekly some local stations. And I know I have a hard time down in my shop here getting radios to work properly. So, and by the way, when I had it in the wrong band and I'm listening to the noise that the radio picks up as I tune through it, it pretty much sounds the same as the broadcast band noise. And I got fooled completely. Well, I'm not fooled any longer, and I've learned a little bit now. Another thing is, in this band, it has all these names of cities, and that's typical of shortwave. But in this case, it's actually the AM broadcast band that has all these different cities on it. So all these things went together to throw me off track. Apparently it's not hard to do. But the good news is, once I put it on the broadcast band, it seems to work. Well, seems to work as okay as I can find out here in my shop. Another thing I considered here is, where am I going with this radio anyway? Am I going to align it? As it turns out, everything that can be adjusted has been waxed up pretty heavily. And so if I'm going to try to adjust something, I'm going to have to dig out the wax and deal with that. And that's not a good idea. It really isn't. In a repair situation, in a radio that's in relatively good condition, fiddling around with the alignment is probably not going to get much benefit. That's always been my experience, except with the odd radio. Alignment is generally pretty good. That's how my experience has gone. So what I decided to do with this one is turn my attention to cleaning it up and getting it more presentable, and taking it out of my shop once I have it all back together, and take it to some location where I can really test it. So that's what's going to happen now. Up here on the top, after I remove the glass, which is something I don't normally do, by the way. I don't normally remove glass. I am very scared, because if you break the glass, then you've ruined the radio. And this is somebody's radio, and they expect it back. So while I have the glass out over here, I am quite nervous that something bad might happen. On the other hand, this gives me a great chance to clean it up. And you can see I've done the face of the glass. I haven't touched it in behind yet. But I really turned my attention to this back plate and this squeaker. Not squeaking so much, is it? There it is. You can actually see the skid mark. It's the effect of having a long piece of metal and dragging the far end slightly. And of course, as you drag it across, it stutters. It stops and starts. And it does that at such a high rate, you hear this fairly high-pitched sound. Now let's just see if I can absolutely prove it and convince myself Okay, now I'm using a different playbook here. I do not have any way of standing it up. So I'm just going to set it here for a moment, and I'm going to lift the pointer dial off the back here. Okay, there's the squeak. Okay, it's off the back. That's a lot better. So, and in doing that, I discovered there's a huge amount of springiness. Yeah, it's a very large amount of springiness holding this guy back. So we're going to deal with that springiness a little bit. And that's because this thing's riding on rails under here. I don't know if I can get them on camera or not, but the piece is riding on some rails, so it's mechanically much more solid than many of these, which is just riding on a string, and it's really quite floppy. This one's not so floppy. So I think, and plus give me a chance to straighten it out, because it's on an angle this way. I can just straighten it out, and you know, this is eye candy. When something like that is slightly out of alignment, you know, just the pointer's on a bit of an angle, it's a major detractor when you look at the radio, because your eye immediately goes to it, and your brain starts thinking, what's the matter here? So if we can get this guy straightened up properly, it will actually have a fairly big effect on making the radio look better, even though it's such a minor thing. So those are all the reasons I took the glass off, along with, there's a lot of dust in here that had fallen into it, so I got all that out. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to polish, clean this guy up, fix this guy as best I can, and so he's not noisy and he's straight. And then I'm going to put the glass back on, put the whole thing back in the cabinet. I have a little bit of cabinet work to do here. I got to put that piece back on. And then I'm going to take this whole thing to some location in my property, probably outside, and give it a good try and see how it really works, because I just don't think I'm getting it the way it should be down here in the shop. Of just basically putting the glass back in the radio, and it's very nerve-wracking for me. I hate working on the glass. I'm scared out of my wits when it's out of the radio that I'm going to drop it. I'm going to apply too much pressure. When I put it back in the radio, sometimes there's pressure points. When you're tightening down screws, all of it makes me nervous that I'm going to crack the glass. This one was no different, and I'm so very, very cautious. I put the glass in, and this corner here didn't want to go down where it needed to go in order I could put the screw back in and fit this bracket on. And I'm putting pressure on it, and I'm thinking, I just, doesn't feel right. And finally I took a really close look at it, and it's hard to see, but in this radio there are little bumpers. You can kind of see a bit of one just above my finger there. You can see this one fairly clearly. These bumpers in each corner. And the clamps actually squeeze the glass against these bumpers. And I had imagined the bumpers were just little, just like they look. Then they look just like that. But in fact, they have a little stem out the bottom that goes through a hole in the back of the display box, or whatever you want to call this. And this one stuck to the glass. When I took the glass off, it came with it. Pulled it out of that hole. When I put it back, I hadn't noticed any of this. And of course, the little peg piece didn't line up in the hole, and the whole thing was riding high. And I'm putting pressure, and so nervous, thank God, I finally decided I better take a closer look. And then I discovered the little peg. I managed to get it. I had to trim it down to get it back in the hole. Got it back in. Everything's put back together. And it looks pretty good now. Cleaning the metal plate in the background was pretty important. It was full of dust. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. So, final stage here. Put it back in the cabinet and polish up the cabinet. And the cabinet suffered like most. It's got the, how much you want to guess that was a plant sitting there on it. So a little bit of cleanup though. It'll look a lot better. But it's never going to look like new, that's for sure. And maybe it shouldn't look like new. A radio that's mostly in original condition is bound to show wear and tear. And aside from cleaning off dirt and stuff like that, doing a little more to it wouldn't be the best thing. So for instance, refinishing this cabinet. make it look beautiful, but it wouldn't be the same old radio. So that's the next stage anyway. Put it all back together, polish it up, and then I'm going to take it out and give this thing a good test. I think I'm going to take it right out of my house. It's a beautiful day outside, and I'll give it a test out on my deck later. And we'll see just how well it receives. Well, here it is outside of my house, being tested on a fairly decent antenna. And I'm afraid I have to report it doesn't work at all. Other than a few pops and a few groans here and there. I'll go across the... Okay, that's my neighbor working there a bit. I'll just go across the band here. And there's nothing. There isn't any of that interference either. There's just nothing. Okay, I think it's back into the shop for some more fiddling. Looks nice. Doesn't work. Not the best result so far.